here. So I'll start again. So for those of you who are watching the recording, I already kind of went through this, but I'm Professor Lannis. This is B251. So this class is, we have a couple technical difficulties I should have worked out. I couldn't get in the classroom last week that I'm using to record these, but we will meet every single day, 11:15 to 12:30. I will present lecture just like I would in a regular semester. I think it's best if you're able to kind of log on, ask questions as I'm going through things. Um, see it worked through live. I think that, you can tell yourself that watching the recording, you're going to be just as dialed in, but I don't think that that's probably always the case. Um, However, my expectation isn't that you're always going to be here. And I do make all of these lectures, I record them and we'll post them to a course playlist, which we can kind of pull up here. So let's see. Got too many tabs open. So if we go to YouTube, you kind of see this is my account. So Professor Lantis. If you ever can't find the link, which I'll show it to you in the slides in a second, it's in the syllabus. You can always search Professor Lantis on YouTube, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. In fact, you can kind of see here. Here's my account. Here's all the different playlists. I've already got playlists created for my two summer sections here of B251. I had this pre-class video. Don't worry about watching it. It was more of a placeholder until we had today's first recording. I'll then replace it with the recording today. I just have to have something posted there. Otherwise, the playlist doesn't show up. And I wanted people, if they were looking for it, to be able to kind of find that. So this is where I will put all of the recordings every single day. After class, I'll go back to my office. Excuse me, give it a little bit of time to compile and then kind of upload it here. So if you do miss class, you'll always have these. You can go back and watch them even if you do attend class. But this is where all the videos will live. Okay. You can kind of see I've got some old sections that are still up there as well. Things change a little bit. So I would, make sure you're getting into the correct, summer 2025 and then your section. So we've also got, let's see here. The Canvas page, that's where I'll kind of communicate things. I've already got the Zoom link for today's class. Many of you who are here obviously already found it. And I'll post anything that in between classes, if there's something that I need to kind of information and get out to you guys, I will do it through Canvas announcements. Okay. So you don't see all of this because it's not all published yet. And I have kind of a behind this, there's some inside baseball. I have like a template course that I kind of copy things over. So I haven't copied everything over yet, but I've got enough kind of to get us to that first exam. So we'll start here. If you want, go to files, right? I've got the first lecture up there. After today, I will start kind of adding in like what we do day by day. So the lecture slides, any other materials, but I think the most, what you're really going to be concerned with is this kind of assignments tab in terms of what's due. But every single lecture, you kind of noticed I've got lecture one sitting there just so it's easy to find today. But starting tomorrow, we'll kind of start with lecture two. I've got all of the files that we'll need for module two, which each module will take us about 2 days to cover. Module one is a little different because it's mostly kind of setting us up. It's a little bit shorter, and I'm doing a lot of syllabus review today. So here's lecture one for today, the module one materials. I've got the outline. So this is going to be every single module will have an outline where I just kind of put what the learning objectives are. The book that we're using, I'll kind of show you that here in a second. Module one, modules are essentially chapters. Here's kind of all of the different learning objectives we'll work through. And then every single module, I say week one here, I should probably rename this after I was recording. It's module one, but it's questions that are going to be related to that module. Okay. So let's start going through lecture one slides. And there we go. Oh, I don't want to use this. This is not what I want. Let's see. Let's do. No. is the problem when I had to switch to my laptop. So I want to do here and then what? There we go. So we'll kind of get started here. And I'm just going to outline today is basically me going through the syllabus, and I'll pull up the syllabus file and kind of point some things out as we go through the slides. But this is really, I'm not expecting you to go through that syllabus with a fine-tooth comb. I'm going to kind of summarize the important things here for us and what the takeaways should be. So the book that we're going to be using for this class is an e-text. So it's on a website called Top Hat. So every chapter is going to be, or every module, go through here, is going to have essentially a set of questions within it that I'm making an assignment. So we'll talk through this here in a second, but the e-text is also going to be something that we use for assignments. So it is required, right? I will assign problems from this e-text. And once we get to that category in the slides, I'll kind of switch over to show you what that looks like. When it comes to exams, homeworks, you're going to need a calculator, if that's on your, it's kind of a web-based class. If that's, it doesn't have to be a physical calculator, it can be on your computer, but you're going to need something to make some calculations. We won't do anything crazy in this class. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division is about as far as we'll go. Another thing that's kind of required is going to be obviously the lecture slides. Now I give those to you, so it's not like you have to, register for that or anything. I will always post a skeleton version, so I leave some things out. Typically, it's things that I'm going to draw on the overhead dot cam. After the class, I always will post the completed version, which it doesn't have everything that I drew, but it has, like a visual of something similar, right? So there might be things that I do in class on the dot cam that don't even end up in the complete version of the slides. So it's really important. And I think I like the skeleton slides because if you see a blank slide, basically that's an indicator to you, I should be writing something down. And that's how I would approach this class, even though it's web-based. I'd watch these lectures, and when I get to those slides where they're blank, whatever I'm writing down there, you should be copying as well. Now you'll have them in the video recording. But I think learning by doing and just kind of that motor, memory of kind of how I draw these graphs out, what a supply demand shift looks like, et cetera. I think it's helpful to kind of work along with me. So I post those skeleton slides and then I'll post a complete version after we get done with class. I've already mentioned the Zoom link for this class. Now, when you come in, I have a course code set there just so we don't get like random people. I don't know how that would ever happen, but inevitably it would. I did this I remember all the way back to the COVID days teaching, and I'd always end up with someone there if I didn't put a code. So the code is just the section number, so 4296. And then on the YouTube page, I kind of already showed you that. That's where I'll post all of the recordings after the fact. Okay. All right. Any questions from me before we kind of start diving into a little bit more of the syllabus? I know it's been a little bit of a rocky start here with the technical difficulties, but I should have these ironed out tomorrow. Okay. And just to make sure I say this now as well, I am used to, oh, all you guys can see is a black screen. That is not what I want. So it's not like in the presenter mode. You still only see a black screen. Okay. I don't know how that, so everyone can see it now. So this actually goes to my point that I was about to say. If, I get, when I have people in front of me, I can kind of see just by look on faces if something's going wrong. I can't see anything, right, as I'm presenting this to you guys. So if you ever, if there's something that's going weird, the audio goes out, you can only see a black screen. By all means, like unmute, speak up, right? Or I'll try to keep an eye on that chat thing. It's not as obvious, and I'm probably out of practice of looking for as the semester goes. I'll probably get used to looking at the screen more. But if there's ever an issue, make sure you kind of feel free. You can kind of speak up. I want this, The whole purpose of you being able to log on as I'm going through this is that you can get as close to an in-person experience as possible with a web-based class. So, what do you guys care about, right? How are you going to get the grade you want in this class? So, exams are going to be a large percent of this class, right? So, this is where getting points not from exams become very important because exams are not just participation based, it's correctness based, right? It's a measure of how well you understand the material. So in some of those other categories we'll talk about in a second, there's what I kind of think of as more participation. Like as long as you get on and do it, you can get some easy points there, and that kind of helps your grade. So we'll have three exams, two midterms and a final. So basically, excuse me, this is a 6-week course. Every 2 weeks, we're going to have an exam. So next week's a little bit weird because of July 3rd, but I only need one day to go through module one. So usually every module is 2 classes. So just to kind of give you a little bit of foreshadowing here, today's module one, tomorrow, Wednesday, module two. Module three will then be Thursday, Friday. Module four is next Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll have a class period Wednesday for review. So that's where I'll be working through a lot of problems from a practice exam that I'll post. And then on Thursday, during the allotted, we'll have the actual exam. And I'll talk about how those will work here in just a second. And then next week is July 4th on Friday, so we don't have class then. After that, it's just always going to be 2 class periods for each module. We'll go through 4 modules, and then we'll take and have a review day and then take the exam on the Friday. All right. So, and I'll, as we, I'll mention these dates and everything as we go, but I'm just kind of trying to give you a little bit of a roadmap here. Another thing that's graded for correctness, although I think it's easier because you will have a lot of your materials in front of you. There's not as many questions. You have more time per question, are Canvas quizzes. So there will be a Canvas quiz for every single module. So we're going to be covering 13 modules, but when we get there, once again, I'll mention this again, but 5 and 6, I'm going to kind of combine together. So we'll have a total of 12 Canvas quizzes, right? It's going to be worth 18% of your overall grade. And then, but once again, you have all your materials, your notes, everything can kind of be in front of you there. I don't write them probably as quite as difficult as the exams. And I also will give you a set of practice problems for every single module quiz. So you have like a set of practice problems that looks pretty similar to the quiz. So it should be some really good practice so you feel prepared going into those. Now, here's where there's some really easy points. So these class readings, module questions, I'll pull up Top Hat here in a second and kind of show you how these work, but they're going to be 4% of your overall grade. These are basically, as long as you get on and get them done, you should be able to get almost all the points in this category. I think even in a regular semester, if I'm looking at the average score, it's like a 95%, right? So these, as long, and I say that for people that complete all of them on time, it's about a 95% in this category. So they really are easy points that kind of help keep your grade up. I'm also going to have class participation and attendance. So these are going to be daily quizzes, and I'll actually post one after class today. And they're always going to be due before the next class. So, or sorry, not before the next class. I always have them set to be due like at the end of the week. So that way, if you can't attend class or you have something come up, it's not you have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule. So we'll kind of look at a few of those here on Canvas in a second and look at those due dates. But these are just going to be questions that I literally worked through for you in class. It's the exact same questions that I'm going to post as a little quiz on Canvas. Generally, it's 2, 3 questions per class period, but I gave you the answer in class. So as long as you're watching those lecture slides, as long as you're getting on and getting, answering those questions, once again, you should be able to get all of these points, right? Now, I don't think this is going to be best for your learning, but at the very worst, I probably shouldn't suggest this, but let's say you have a really busy day or a bad something. Oh, I forgot this. I got to get this daily quiz. I've only got 30 minutes to get this done. Well, you can kind of go back through the recorded lecture and find where we work through the problems, and I should be able to see the correct answer. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that. It's not going to help you when you then go to take the Canvas quizzes and the exams. But I'm trying to reiterate, these should be easy points. You've got the recorded lecture to go back and review, even if you didn't attend class live. And it's the exact same questions I'm going to work through in class. Okay. So these Canvas quizzes, oh, there we go. They're always going to be due at the end of the week. So whatever modules we cover that week, that Canvas quiz will be due by the end of that Sunday, with the exception of when we have a week with an exam, that modules quiz will be due the night before the exam, right? So like next week, module 4, I'll assign that quiz. You'll need to complete it before at the end of the day on Wednesday, right? So we have a little bit less time for that. So, but still giving you that flexibility with the other modules. Okay. I'll always post them once we've covered the module. I'll post it right after class. I said 12:30 here. Give me 15 minutes just to kind of, get back to my office, hit publish, and make sure everything's kind of ready to go. Also, in the event that somehow I didn't quite cover as much material as I had expected, maybe taking a question and kind of replacing it or something like that. But they'll be posted shortly after class. If you miss a quiz, it's going to count as a 0, right? So there's no exceptions. You can see those due dates on Canvas as soon as those quizzes are posted. In fact, some of them are already up there. I'll kind of show you here in a second. So even though there are 12 quizzes, I will only take your best 10, right? So that allows you to have two quizzes where you don't do too well. Now, technically, it also lets you miss 2 quizzes. Those would be your lowest as zeros. The only problem is I wouldn't do that because inevitably, if you miss 2 quizzes, those are going to be your lowest. And then if you don't do well on one of the other ones, well, I only dropped the lowest 2, so now that one's going to count towards your grade. So I would plan on doing every single quiz. That way, your 2 lowest that get dropped won't just be zeros. It'll be the 2 quizzes that you didn't do the best on. Okay. Um, is that clear? Any questions on that before I keep moving? So there's nothing in the chat here. Okay. And let's see. Stop sharing. Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Here. There we go. So if we go to the assignments tab, I haven't published them yet, but even after today's class, I'll get this first module quiz published. So as soon as we cover that module, I'll publish the quiz. You'll notice after today's class, you'll have until the end of the day, Sunday, to complete this. Same kind of thing for module 2 quiz. I think it was even nicer on module 3, even though we're going to cover it this week. I'm going to give you a little bit more time, a little bit more flexibility. So then module 3 and 4 will be due next week at the end of the day, Wednesday, before that exam that we take on the 3rd. Okay. Um, so, back here. Once again, double check. It's not a black screen, correct? Are we required to pay access to the? Yeah, so you will have to pay for access to that e-text on Top Hat. That is, like I said, we will use that for assignments, and I'll kind of show you that here in just a second. Okay. It's not a black screen. Can anybody verify? Okay, your screen just went black. So what is it doing? It doesn't like that. Let's see. Let's try going here one more time. And then instead of what did I do before? Did I do no? Still black? Oh, I'm delayed. Everyone see it now?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, just making sure. Like I said, I'll have to play around with this. I didn't want to use my laptop today, so I'm gonna have to make sure I get this classroom working by tomorrow. Um, so we talked about the Canvas quizzes, class readings, similar kind of thing, and I'll pull up the e-text here in just a second. Now This one's a little bit different because I'm not going to have 12 of them. We're only going to have 11 because the first one, module one, is what we'll be kind of talking about today. Um, Maybe spill over a little bit into the start tomorrow's class, but not a lot. So I'll take your best 10. So basically there, I'm only going to drop your lowest one, but these should be pretty easy. I'm going to give you 2 attempts at every single question. They're multiple choice questions. As long as you're kind of even skimming the text, those questions should be relatively easy. So we'll have a module reading for every module. It'll be due before we cover that module in class. So the very first one that I'll post after class today will be for module two, which we start tomorrow. Right? In fact, I think for module two, I'll probably have it set so that it doesn't have to be done before we meet in class tomorrow. It's a little bit short of a time frame. I'll have it set to be due before we meet in class on Wednesday. But after that, every single module reading will be due before we start that module. Right? Just this first one will kind of give you a little bit more time. So and then module five and six. And once we get there, I'll kind of mention, make sure I reiterate, I'm only going to assign one of these. So I'm going to kind of combine them. So we'll have a total of 11 module readings. Okay. And I'll drop your lowest. So let's see. I'll go here. So you can kind of already see these posted on Canvas. So I've already got the first 4 published. So this first one is just for review. Once again, once we get to module 5, that one's also just going to be for review. The ones that are going to be have an actual due date, we'll start with module 2. So the 25th, that'll be due, we'll notice 11:15. So right before, technically you can work on it that morning, right up until we start class on Wednesday. Okay. And then for module 3, since we're going to start that on Thursday, it'll be due right before we start class on Thursday. Module 4, right before we start class on Monday. Okay. So due right before the class, we start the module after module 2. As like I said, that's a little bit different. But from here on out, it'll always be due before we start covering it in class. Okay. All right. So just click here, take us to Top Hat. So this is the Top Hat platform. You should already be able to see. I'll kind of release these as we go, but you can read through the module once it's assigned. So if you go on right now, you should be able to see this one. I have it set to review. So module 1, that one's now an assigned one, but that's the first chapter of the book. You'll notice like here's one of the questions. It's directly related to what the text that's right below it, right? The difference between micro and macroeconomics. And then module 1 is a little bit different. So if we look at module 2, some of them are opinion based, which are just given credit for basically just answering, but there are some that there is a correct answer to, right? So usually they're like multiple choice or select all that apply. And you'll notice there's not a ton. I think I've got 8 items here. Once again, they're directly related to whatever text is right before or sometimes right below them. Generally, they try to insert them right below, but given the however the text is flowing, sometimes the information might spill over to after the question as well. So you'll see there's 8 different questions. We scroll down here. Where's the other question? There should be one. Yeah, here's a couple, and you'll have two guesses at each question. So even if you get it wrong on the first one, you can still get the full points for that question by getting it right the second time. So you can't just mindlessly go through these, but as long as you put a little bit of effort into these, you should be able to get the vast majority of these points. Okay. Any questions on that before we keep moving? Keep an eye here on the chat. Okay. All right. I think the last time I did this, so let's see. All right. So here's how to register for Top Hat. You've got kind of a course code that's specific to this section. So I've got that kind of here. If you're having any troubles getting registered for Top Hat, please reach out to me via email. Um, I will check my email religiously every day, looking for any kind of email so I can get responses to you very, very quickly. But this is the kind of steps of how you can get registered. there's a more detail. I think if you're having some issues just with the basic ones, this is like a longer, more detailed version. But this should suffice here. Okay. I should mention an important thing. So hopefully, if you haven't already done this, it's okay. We can work it out. But things work a little bit more seamlessly if you click on this top hat link. Or sorry, don't click on this top hat link. Click on the top hat link that's on Canvas, right? So if you go to Canvas on the left-hand side, there should be this top hat link. I would go to Top Hat from here. It just automatically then links up to your Canvas account, and it just automatic that makes the grades automatically kind of show up in Canvas. If you've already registered, or for some reason you don't do it through this link, it's okay. We can still get things matched up and get your grades over. It just is a lot more seamless if you first kind of register by clicking on this Top Hat link. Okay. Any other questions before we keep moving here? And I won't even go back to share this because the next thing that you'll be graded on, I said, are really easy points, are these class participation quizzes. So this is essentially how I'm replacing attendance, um, basically ensuring that you're watching these lectures. So there should be 20 of them, excuse me, or sorry, 24 of them throughout the semester. I will take your best 20. So if you miss a couple, right, those would be zeros, kind of similar to the quizzes. Those will be the ones that get dropped. So, you know, I would take these seriously because it should be 4 points on each one. These are very easy to get. 8% of your overall grade for simply getting on and answering a question that I gave you the answer to in class, I think is pretty generous. And I think it's a good way to kind of uh, compensate for maybe if you don't do as well on one of the exams. Okay. If, you have like a day where you're sick and you can't get on one, well, that's why I kind of bake in these additional 4 quizzes that get dropped. Obviously, if you have extended illnesses or something, I think one semester in online class, I had someone who had a really bad concussion and couldn't look at a screen for like a week. Obviously, we worked something out, and that's a kind of an extenuating circumstance. But for anything that's like one day where, oh, I got busy with a family commitment and I couldn't get on and get the quiz done, those aren't going to be excused. That's why I have those kind of 4 built in. Those would be essentially like the ones that, get dropped. Okay. But you'll see I've already got quite the first, all the participation quizzes before that first exam are actually already on Canvas. You just can't see them. After today's class, I will publish this first one. In fact, you can kind of take a look at it now, publish it right now. And then I'll even show you what the answers are. So a lot of the times in class, I'll have this pulled up. So if you do attend lecture live, I would have this participation quiz pulled up. I'll get it published as soon as right before class starts so that I can access it and show it to you. And you can answer it live as we're covering in lecture. Now, obviously, if you don't attend lecture, you can always do it after the fact, but it makes it a lot easier if you do attend to just fill it out while we're working through it. So we haven't talked about this yet, but kind of the idea of when do you decide to do something or when do you buy one more of something is when which of the following are true. Well, we'll end up talking about it's the comparison of marginal cost and marginal benefits. So usually I would probably cover these quizzes more towards the end of class. Today's a little bit of an exception. And then which of the following is not part of your final grade? Well, we've already talked about. We've got, I said, weekly module quizzes. So every week we're going to have these module quizzes. Midterm exams, we've got 2 of those. We've got participation quizzes. This is one of them. And then we've already also talked about module readings. So the only one that's not part of your, there's no research paper in this class, right? So pretty easy questions. We'll cover something before we get out of class here related to this. And then usually I would kind of go through the questions at the end of class, and these should be pretty easy points. Now, I'm also, though, giving you some questions that after today start to get a little bit more difficult and do start to look more like questions you could see on the weekly quiz or on an exam. So these are typically also good questions to be able to go back and review. Okay. Any other questions before we keep moving here? See if there's anything in the chat. We're good. Um, I already mentioned this earlier, but I will use Canvas to post any announcement. So even if I make an announcement in the live lecture, if it's pertinent and important to the class, I will typically also post an announcement on Canvas. Once again, not assuming that everybody is able to attend every single live lecture. So Canvas is really going to be kind of your holy grail to kind of make sure you're getting all the information that even if I said it in class and you missed it, I'll kind of have a follow-up announcement on Canvas. I have a TA, you have a TA as well that you can reach out to. So here's their email. If you have any questions over content, um, feel free to reach out to them first. They're usually kind of like my first line of defense. And if they don't know how to answer your question, they'll usually direct your email to me. Now, you can always email me directly as well. Usually this is a little bit more important when I have my 300-person lectures. These smaller summer sections, if you do have a question, the TA, you might end up just liking them more than me. They might be a little bit quicker in their responses because I've got a couple classes I'm teaching throughout the day, so they might see your email before I do. But they're another good resource to be able to ask questions to. And they have office hours, which let's see here. Go to the files tab because I can't remember off the top of my head. Here's the syllabus under the files tab on Canvas. What their office hours are going to be a little bit later in the day. So 3:30 to 5:30, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Here's a Zoom link for their virtual office hours. So you can kind of jump on there, ask any questions during that time slot, or email them. Right. And then my office hours are also posted here, which I think I've gotten a slide here in a second. And I'm also going to have a virtual office hours. So it's not, you'll be able to see me, talk to me. Once again, trying to replace that in-person experience as much as possible in a web-based class. Okay. Make sure there's no questions here before I keep moving. All right. So, this is kind of just a kind of set us up. We'll talk about a lot of things this semester that oh, something in the chat. How will exams work? I will be there in just a second. We'll talk about exams once we get to kind of the end before we jump tap into material here. So I will not forget about your question. Um, so we'll talk about a lot of different things in this class that are, I don't know, political adjacent. I'm not making any political statements about anything in class. We're just trying to analyze, right, why decisions are made, what the implications of those decisions are. We're not saying anything's right or wrong. So, we'll be talking about taxations. We'll be talking about the different types of structures of economies. Is one better than the other? We're not trying to make any statements of this is better than this. We're just trying to analyze the impacts of different decision making. So, if you think of something like there's a plastic bag tax. Forget who did this. Some European country, and there the idea is, well, littering is bad for society. So how can we limit how much people are polluting? Like, getting rid of these plastic, because plastic bags inevitably end up in a landfill. Well, maybe people will use less if we tax them. Well, but then some people say, well, you're taxing people to use a plastic bag to carry things. That's not right. But we're not making a statement about whether or not it's right or wrong. We're just trying to understand what the implications of taxing plastic bags would be, which is that you raise the price and people won't use as many. So this is just kind of my, setting us up for this semester. Let's, keep in mind that we're not trying to make statements that this is better than that. We're just analyzing what the implications of different decision making would be. So to the exams, right? So I've got some important dates here. Really, the withdrawal date is the only other thing other than the exams. So the way that we're going to do this, and I put during class here, I am going to expect that there's a shorter time frame of when you take these exams, right? It's not like you're going to have, a whole week to take them. They will take place starting when our class usually would start. All right. So On July 3rd, which is the Thursday, I said a little bit weird because of the 4th, and then Friday, the 18th of July, and then August 1st, the last day of class. The final exam will be published on Canvas and be made available at the start of class, so 11:15. Instead of just giving you just class time, though, you can get on any time between 11:15 and 3:30. So anytime, or sorry, 11:15 and 3:15. All right, so there'll be a 3 hour time block. Wait, not three, 4 hour time block. Um, that you can get on any time in there and take it, right? So if your schedule's a little bit weird and you can't attend on one morning, you take in the afternoon, you'll have a little bit more flexibility there. Now, once you start, you're only going to have a certain amount of time to take it. So for that midterm, the amount of time that you're going to have to be able to take that midterm is going to be an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. So kind of the typical class time, right? For the final, I have a little bit of additional time. So once you start, you'll have, from whenever you start it, you'll have 2 hours. Okay. So you do kind of have to have these dates. You do have to be available for the midterms, an hour and 15 time block in between 11:15 and 3:15. For the final, you have to have a 2 hour time block available sometime between 11:15 and 3:15. Does that makes sense? Are there any questions or clarifying questions about that? And I'll kind of reiterate this as we get closer. Like I said, we'll have a whole class period where we do review for the exam, and I'll mention a little bit more of the logistics of the exam as well. But they're just going to be 25 multiple choice questions, and then the final will be 30 multiple choice questions. Okay, so a little bit longer. That's why you have a little bit more time. And if we go all the way back here, that's why it's weighted a little bit more as well. I have a few more questions there. Okay. Any questions before we keep moving here? Okay. All right. So, um, how are you going to succeed in this class? Right? So I say read the book. I mean, I'm not expecting you go through and read the book like with a fine, go through with a fine tooth comb or read it very diligent. I am expecting you at the very least skim it and skim it enough to be able to answer the module questions correctly. Okay. And doing that before they are due. So before, getting that done before class, when those module readings are due, it's some easy points, but it also primes your brain. So the reason why I'm using these module questions and kind of having this book is so that your brain is primed for the topics and we don't have to take as much time setting things up. Can have an expectation that you at least know some of the terms, you at least have somewhat of an idea, even if it's not a perfect understanding of how, to work through some of these questions and these different topics, you at least have a good base, right? So that's going to be important. I put show up to class here. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to be at the live lectures, although I think that's probably going to be best. But if you're not able to, making sure that if you ever do miss one, you go on and watch that recording and, just be honest with yourself. Try to remove, don't go to, I see people sometimes like watching a lecture and then they're like, you got five other tabs pulled up, you're in a coffee shop and it's loud. I mean, try to give yourself an environment that encourages learning and your focus, right? Practice, practice, practice. So I kind of mentioned this a little bit, but every single quiz, I'm going to post some practice problems, and every single exam, I'll have a set of practice problems. So you can see here already, well, module one, I've got practice problems and then kind of the answer key as well. So I would every single before you take the quiz, the module quiz, work through these practice problems without the answers, see how many, and then look at the answer key, see how many you get right or wrong. And the ones that you got wrong, or the ones you got right and you weren't really sure if, you kind of guessed, make sure you understand why the correct answer is what it is. And if you don't, those would be good ones to reach out to me or attend kind of my office hours, which I'll pull up here in a second. And really make sure you understand why the correct answer is what it is. Now, after module one, I not only will have the answer key, I will also have a solutions manual, right? Kind of how I would work these out by hand. So you can really see like how this should have like a very complete way of working out and solving these problems, not just telling you, the answer is C, right? So these will be helpful in understanding, but even if it's still not clear after looking at this, always feel free to kind of reach out and get some clarification. Okay. Um, let's see here. So take those Canvas quizzes seriously. Once again, kind of practice, look at those practice problems before that. You'll have your notes. You'll have, I think once you start them, I've got it set so you've got an entire hour to answer them. Should be more than enough time. It's a lot more time per question than the exams. So these, take them seriously. They're 18% of your overall grade. That's close to just under an entire exam, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. I know it's a little bit weird, kind of with the web-based, but once again, don't don't feel like you can't unmute and speak up and ask a question as I'm covering material, right? I mean, you can use the chat. I know it's probably a little bit easier, but you can kind of already see today. I'm gonna have to get into practice. Hopefully, after the first week or so, I get more used to kind of double checking the chat. I'm used to people, verbally asking a question or being able to see a hand. So don't be afraid to ask questions in class or out of class, right? So my office hours, I'm always going to be in my office that hour before class starts, right? So 10 to 11. And then right after class, I'll get back to my office and kind of get my virtual Zoom office pulled up. I'll have another half hour from 12:30 to 1. So every single day, Monday through Thursday, I'll have these office hours. And I'll also be around some other times. So if those don't work for you and you do want to meet, I can kind of set something up by appointment. But really, between 9 and kind of 4 every day is really when I'm going to be available. But these are kind of my set office hours. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we keep moving here related to the class? Kind of dive into some material here. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can get this to not go black on us here. For whatever reason, every time I've done this, I've done it twice, it seems to show up. So let's see if that, yeah, I see things okay here. Okay. All right. So kind of starting with module one, setting up what economics is. It's at its core, it's how do people make decisions facing scarce resources, right? Now, a lot of times people will think of this as money, but the scarce resource can be time, right? Um, how do you decide to do what you do with your day, given the fact that there's only 24 hours and you're only awake for, however many you're awake for? So why don't you go purchase your ideal car? Well, because my ideal, maybe it's a, I don't know, Cybertruck or something, and you don't have, the financial resources to go buy it, right? So that's at its core, that's economics, right? How do people take these scarce resources, whoops, sorry, time, money, are the ones I've already mentioned, and then how do they make choices given that they can't have everything they want or can't do everything they want given these constraints. Now, we'll also think about this in the context later on in the semester of companies, right? I've only got so many people or workers, right? I've only got so many raw materials. I can't just produce everything, right? I might only be able to, given my materials and my workers, I can only produce this product. I can't produce product A and product B. Right? So this is at its core what we'll be kind of talking about. This isn't anything too crazy. So this class is, I think it's technically fundamentals of economics for business one, but really it could be called microeconomics, right? B252 is going to be where you look more at macroeconomics. So what's the difference between micro and macroeconomics? Macroeconomics is just looking at macro, big, right? The study of economies, the entire economy, right? Or things that would impact the entire economy, like inflation, right? What's the money supply? Now, we're not really going to dive into these. We're going to focus in this class on microeconomics, which is more like individual decision making. And when I say individual decision making, this could be the individual could be a firm, right? But it's only going to be one firm or one individual's decision. It's not every single person in the entire economy. Right? So This I'm a little bit partial, but I enjoy microeconomics more than macro. It also allows us to answer very interesting questions about a lot of different areas. So anything from like health decisions, education decisions, like the benefit of education, also the impacts. It can get macro, but really even government decisions and how they impact individual decision making. These are all things that we can look through the lens with using microeconomics. Okay. Now in all of our models, what we're going to assume, and this won't ever be like something where I try to trick you, but at its core, we're assuming that every individual, every firm, country, whatever the person is that we're looking at, is making decisions that are self-interested and rational. So they're always trying to make themselves better off, right? Um, more money, more time, more happiness. So what might, you know, why might this assumption not be best for society? Well, if individuals are trying to make themselves better off, that doesn't necessarily mean society is going to be better off. So, perfect example, I'm driving down the road and I've got some trash and I don't want it in my car. Well, to me, I want more space in my car. I don't want trash in my car. If I just throw it out the window, maybe that's a self-interested, rational decision, right? It made me better off. But if everybody does that, what happens to, what's the benefit to society? Negative, right? We end up with not only a society that's better off, we end up with a society that's worse off, and we end up with pollution. Right? So sometimes this assumption and the fact that people are acting out of self-interest will have negative implications for social benefit or the social interest. Now, we'll also talk about different economic models, and sometimes it might seem like this self-interest is violated, like this assumption. So one that people usually will come up with right away is, well, Professor Land, it's not, look, I do things out of the kindness of my heart for other people, right? Just because I'm not better off, right? I might go out of my way to help my neighbor who's 95 years old. Maybe I'll mow the lawn for her. I took my time, right? I could have been doing other things, and I did this thing for someone else. That's not self-interested. Well, if what you value, I mean, why did you do that? At some level, you must have gotten some amount of happiness or some amount of what we'll end up calling utility, right? By helping this other person, knowing that they don't have to go hire someone else to do it. So it doesn't always have to be, it makes me better off in terms of money, right? Or my personal life. It can be that if helping someone else or doing something that benefits other people, if that also brings me happiness, I'm still acting out of self-interest, right? Having that hour of time to mow my neighbor's lawn, that must not have brought whatever I was going to do with that hour, watch TV or something stupid. That must have brought me less happiness than the happiness that I got from helping them out. Right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. So this is the idea of kind of self-interest. We're going to kind of have that assumption in all of our models. So the first kind of concept we'll really talk about, where we start to get some numbers, is opportunity cost and how people make decisions. Okay. So generally, we think about people will do something as long as the benefit of that action is greater than the cost. And we'll go one step further and talk about marginal changes here in a second, but that's the general idea. Now, what is involved in these costs? So you might say, why would um, would I buy this if it brought me, $20 of benefit and the price is only $10, right? So the benefits outweigh the costs. Well, there's one type of cost that sometimes people don't factor in and actually can lead them to making decisions that aren't in their own self-interest, which is the idea of opportunity costs. So opportunity costs are going to be when I choose to do something, I'm automatically, right? If I'm taking money to buy something, if I'm taking my time to do something, I automatically am choosing not to take that money or time to do something else or to buy something else. So whatever I'm foregoing, that is essentially a cost, right? So if I go into the store and I've got $20 and I don't know, maybe I'm going to Chipotle, that's a better example. And I've got, I don't know, what's a burrito bowl at Chipotle, $10 or so. We'll just round, make a nice number. Well, if I have $10 in my pocket, that's all I have, and I get a burrito bowl, what did I give up? I gave up getting, I don't know, maybe a quesadilla. Well, if I like quesadillas more than burrito bowls, then I gave up something that had higher value than what I bought, right? I should be factoring that into my decision. Why would I have gotten the burrito bowl? So that value of the next best alternative, if we factor that in, it can sometimes change people's decision making. So I think here I've got instead of two different things at the same restaurant, going to two different restaurants, but it would apply the same way, right? You could also think about TikTok usage, right? If you're taking all this time, wasting time on TikTok, you might think, well, yeah, the cost, it's free, right? All these, I mean, as long as I have a phone, like the marginal cost of using TikTok is absolutely nothing. Well, that's not true, right? You're using your time. What could you have been doing with that time? Maybe taking that time and putting it towards something that actually led to you uh, being able to do something more enjoyable than just watch dumb TikTok videos, right? If you're really good, you could be like, maybe I could be playing online poker instead and actually make some money or something like something like that, right? Um, so we want to factor in these opportunity costs. Another good example would be if I call off work to go to a free concert. So my friend calls me, oh, I've got these tickets. Like, let's go over to Ruoff, some band that I want to see. Okay, awesome. Huge benefit. I love this band. Completely free ticket. So there's no cost, right? Well, if I called off work to go to this concert, what was the cost to me? However much money I could have made at work. So whatever I'm foregoing by taking my time to go to that concert, foregoing how much money I could have made at my job, that's my opportunity cost. And I should be factoring that into my decision making. So this is why there's kind of this age-old adage in economics, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Because even if something doesn't have a sticker like ticket price to it, I'm still going to have to be choosing not to do something else. And whatever I'm giving up, that has value to me. So if a deal is too good to be true, then it usually is. Like, what do you think? Free lunch. Okay, it's free, but right, it's not always going to be no cost to doing that. So I've got maybe a little bit more of a example where we've got some actual values we can kind of think about how opportunity cost could change decision making. So you guys have probably way missed the boat. Hopefully, you've all made living arrangements for the upcoming fall semester. But if let's go back in time and assume you were trying to make your decision about where you wanted to live for this upcoming semester, right? And okay, just making sure there's no questions. And you have three apartments you can choose from. Um, you like all of them equal, right? They're like the same amenities, the exact same square footage, everything. Like once you're in the room, they're on the same floor. Everything is the exact same about these apartments, right? But we have different rental prices, right? So in my setup, why might apartment A be more? If they're the exact built in the same year, everything's the same, why might apartment A be a little bit more costly? What's one feature of an apartment on or around campus that makes it attractive? Well, being closer to the buildings that you need to get to. So my guess, if I was looking at this, is well, apartment A is probably closer to campus. Well, why do they know they can get away with charging you more? Because, right, if I just looked at this and I don't factor in how much time I'm giving up by living in each one of these apartments, I'm going to look at it and say, well, apartment C, it's the cheapest. Everything else is the exact same. I'm going to choose apartment C. But if there's one thing different about these apartments, which is the distance that they are from campus, well, every single day I've got to walk to and from campus. And over the course of a semester, that's going to be a certain number of hours, right? And if I value my time at all, I might be willing to pay to have more of that time back. Oh, sorry. Um, so if apartment A is closer, apartment B is a little further away, apartment C is even further, I'm going to be giving up more time if I choose to live in apartment C. So yes, its rental price is lower. The cost, right, is lower, but the opportunity cost, I'm giving up more time, that opportunity cost is going to be higher. So now it's not as easy to figure out which apartment would be optimal for me to choose. Because even though apartment A is going to cost me a little more money, it's going to cost me a lot less time. And if I value my time, I need to somehow be factoring in um, that I'm giving up less time. So how would we do that? Okay. So let's say I have a job, I don't know, where I can work an hourly rate of $10. That's how I usually set up people thinking about how we put a dollar amount at a time, but it could just be like if I could pay to get another hour in my day, I'd pay $10. Right? Or that could be the idea as well. So if I value every hour at $10, then really every month, right? If I have to give up 12 hours, right? I might have misspoke earlier. I think I said semester. I have this all as kind of monthly, right? Here was like the obviously it's not $1,000 per semester, it's $1,000 per month. Um, but if I choose apartment A, well, the rental price was 1,000, but the opportunity cost, the value of the time that I was giving up was what? Every hour is worth $10, so $120. And then apartment B was a little further away, C was further away. So if we factor in the opportunity costs, then the total cost of each apartment would be what? The rental price as well as the opportunity cost. So what is the total cost of choosing each one of these apartments? Well, now I can see apartment A, the total cost is a little bit higher than apartment B, but now apartment B's total cost is a little bit lower than apartment C once I factor in this opportunity cost. So if they were all the same distance, I didn't think about the fact that they might be different distances, I might have chosen apartment C. But the fact that they are different distances from campus and there's going to be different opportunity costs associated with each one, if I factor in my opportunity costs, which one has the lowest cost? It's actually going to be apartment B. So this is just kind of a quick little example that kind of shows when we're making decisions, I might make a different decision if I forget to factor in some of my opportunity costs. Any questions on that before we keep moving here? Okay. Now, let's see if we can kind of, and get someone to be brave here. What if I value my time at $20 instead of 10? Which one of these apartments is going to start to become more attractive to me? Or would the total cost, maybe think about the other way. Which of these apartments is the total cost going to start to increase more? So if I value my time more, which one of these apartments is the opportunity cost going to go up by? Well, whichever one is further away. If I'm not multiplying by 10, I'm multiplying by 20. It's now going to have an even larger opportunity cost. So which of these apartments is more likely to be the one I choose now? It's going to be a little more likely I choose A. Let's see if someone's guessing here. Yeah, the most expensive one. Because when we say most expensive, that was the rent, right? The total cost, we want to factor in both rent and the opportunity cost. So if I value my time more, that opportunity cost is going to stay relatively low for the one that was close to campus, but the ones that were further, it's going to increase that opportunity cost a lot. Here, if we went all the way up to 20, now what apartment would I choose? Well, which one has the lowest total cost? It would be apartment A. Okay. I mean, I think this is somewhat intuitive. Like you probably could think about this without looking at the actual numbers. But this is, it's not just rental decisions. This would apply to every decision. We should be factoring in these opportunity costs in order to make the optimal decision. All right. Where are we at in time here? Okay. So we go to 12:30. So we should have plenty of time to get through this. Perfect. All right. So we've now thought about this idea of opportunity costs. We can also think about the idea of marginal costs, right? So the marginal cost, the word marginal, and we'll be using this all throughout the semester, all it means is the additional, right? So marginal cost is the additional cost associated with making a choice. Now, later on, we'll start thinking about it's like the additional cost of producing one more unit, right? Or the additional cost of buying one more unit of a good. So if we think about this in the context of our apartment example, let's go back and assume that we have the same rent for all of them, right? But they're different distances. So we've got these commuting costs, and I think I went back to like the $10 one. But let's say that they're all the same rent, right? All the same $1,000. Well, if I'm currently in this apartment paying 11, I'm paying 1,000, but I've got an additional opportunity cost of 120. The total cost to me would be $1,120. Well, what if I chose to move to apartment two, right? Well, the benefits could vary. Maybe apartment two has I don't know, a different amenities. Maybe it has like a swimming pool in the complex, which on a day like today sounds like I'd pay a lot of money for it. But if I chose to move to apartment two, what would be the change in just my costs? No, it's not thinking about benefits yet, but just the change in my costs. Well, the total cost apartment I'm currently in is 1,120. And if I move to this other apartment, it's what? 1,240. What was the additional cost? It's just that change in my total cost. So it would be what? $120. But what if I moved from my current apartment to apartment three? Well, what is the change in my total cost? It'd be 240. Okay. So when we're thinking about these marginal costs, it's going to be what is the kind of current scenario? I'm in this current apartment. What would the change in my cost be if I move to apartment two? What would the change in my cost be if I move to apartment three? I could do four or five. I have as many options as I want. Or what we'll often think about is, well, what's the marginal cost of studying one more hour? Well, if I'm giving up an hour, it's however much I value my time at. In our earlier examples, we had one where it was $10, one where it was 20, right? Who do you think has a really high marginal cost to studying an additional hour? Well, this kind of goes back to thinking about opportunity costs. What if I don't know for why he would want to do this, but let's say Elon Musk decides that he wants to I don't know, take my B251 class and he wants to study for an additional hour to get the better grade on the quiz or the exam or something. Well, what's his marginal cost to using an hour to study? Well, what could he be doing with that hour? I don't know, running one of his, his billion-dollar empire, right? So that hour would probably be a lot more valuable if he used it and put it towards, making decisions for Tesla or something like that, right? He has a very high marginal cost to his time. Um, you know, if it was an hour that I was just going to sit around and watch TV, well, maybe then the marginal cost of that hour would be relatively low. Right? So we can start to think about marginal costs, not just like in this apartment example, but the marginal cost of time. What about, driving? I'm kind of thinking about I'm losing time to drive. What's the actual marginal cost? It's not just how much I'm paying for gas, right? But the amount of time that I'm losing in the car. Now, generally, I don't have the bullet point here, but generally, what do we think of as marginal costs for most people? And like if we think about the context of our everyday lives, usually the decision to buy something, what would the marginal cost be? So if you go to a store, what's the marginal cost if you want to buy a t-shirt? It would simply be the price, right? Now, it would also be kind of whatever t-shirt you're not buying, you would want to factor in how much you value that. But generally, we can think about marginal costs and a lot of these models that we'll look at for decision making. A lot of time, marginal cost simply just becomes to the consumer the price of the good. But we can, doesn't have to necessarily just be in dollars and we can think about the marginal cost of time, moving apartments, et cetera. Okay. Now, just like we have marginal costs, we also have marginal benefits, right? So what's the marginal benefit associated with making a choice? We've got some examples here. So what would the marginal benefit be of accepting a job offer? Well, it's the additional benefits I get. So it would be what? I don't know, the salary that I'm getting from that job. What about if I have an hourly job? Well, working one more hour, it would be however much I'm getting paid per hour, right? So if this is a minimum wage job, it would be the marginal benefit from working one more hour would be whatever minimum wage is. What if I'm a company? I sell a gallon of gas. The marginal benefit is the price I'm charging, right? However much I'm charging for that gallon of gas. It's the additional benefit to me. Now, we don't have to just have things in dollar amounts. Well, what's the marginal benefit of me being an economics instructor? I really enjoy teaching about economics. I enjoy the interaction with students. And so there, it's not necessarily a dollar amount. It's a little bit harder to put a value to it. Later on this semester, we'll talk about something called utility, right? Or how much happiness, what's the marginal benefit to me of being an economics instructor? It's marginal happiness, right? What about the value of a better view, right? Well, what's the marginal benefit? Why do people pay so much more money, like a higher marginal cost to buy or to rent a place that's on, say, the ocean? Because waking up every morning and seeing the sunrise over the ocean, that there's a marginal benefit to that, right? Every day there's an additional benefit to having that better view. What about consuming an additional beer, right? So here, I've kind of left some slides open. So this is generally where I would then kind of go to the dot cam, but because it wasn't being cooperative earlier, oh, where is this? I'm going to use, where is it? It's not here. Let's see. There it is. The whiteboard here. Okay. So, um, let's say, oops. Oh, let me erase this here. Let's see if I can draw good here. All right. So let's say I'm thinking about how many beers I want to buy. Right. So let's say I'm kind of putting the dollar amount that I would value each one of these beers at. Now, I always use this example and it's good for a day like today. Like, let's say I went out and mowed the lawn today. It's insanely hot. I get done and, you know, I'm thinking about, man, you know what would just sounds perfect is having a beer as soon as I'm done. All right. Oh, okay. Don't show this again. Um, how much would I be willing to pay after getting done mowing the lawn on a day like today where it's 95? I'd give a bunch. I might give someone $20, my neighbor $20 for that ice cold beer, right? So maybe for that first beer, as soon as I get done mowing the lawn, I'd be willing to pay $20. Here, let me, okay. Now, after I have the first one, how much would I pay them for the second? Well, maybe considerably less. I've got my thirst quenched. I don't know. It's I'm cooling down, but yeah, it's beer's a beer. I wouldn't mind having another one. So I'd give them $10, right? Well, at this point, I'm really cooled down. I know I could probably go to the store. Maybe for that third one, I start to say, I don't really, it's the middle of the day. I still have things to do. I can't just drink my afternoon away. So maybe I'm like, I don't know, all the way down. I only give them $3 for the third beer. So what we'll typically see with marginal benefits is that I'm always willing to pay the most for the very first unit, right? And then subsequent units, I'm willing to pay less and less. Think about it this way. Um, if you have a laptop, how much are you willing to pay for the first one? Usually whatever the price is. Why don't you buy a second one? Because the marginal benefit of having a second laptop is like almost zero. I mean, once I have one, anything I needed that laptop to do, I can already I can already do it with my first one. So generally we think about marginal benefits are going to be declining. Okay. Now, for marginal costs, we'll have different models throughout the semester where sometimes we think about and we'll end up eventually talking about that marginal costs are increasing. But, let's say instead of my example where it was like the neighbor that I was just thinking about running down to the nearest gas station and buying as many beers as I want. And let's say, I don't know, I go there and the price is $5. Well, that price is a constant marginal cost. So sometimes we'll have models where marginal costs are constant. Sometimes we're going to end up talking about later on, module two, we typically see marginal costs are increasing. But if marginal costs were constant here at 5, should I buy that first beer? Well, the marginal benefit, the additional benefit I'm getting, it's how much I was willing to pay. That must be how much it would have benefited me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have paid it, is greater than that marginal cost. For the second one, that marginal benefit was greater than the marginal cost. So I would buy these first two. Would I buy the third? Well, for that third beer, the marginal cost is actually above my marginal benefit. So I wouldn't buy that third. I'd stop at the second. So when people make decisions, right, this marginal decision making, that was kind of the slide I left open for our graph. People are going to make the decision to do something, to buy something, or a firm could be to produce it, as long as the marginal benefit is greater than, so the additional benefits are greater than the additional costs, they will choose to do that, right? And so if we go back to our Canvas quiz here, I think the very first question, not the one related to the syllabus, was when will someone choose to do something? When the marginal benefits are greater than the marginal costs. So to buy one more or to do, produce one more if it's a company, you would always do it if the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal costs. Okay. All right. So that kind of takes us right up to 12:30, the usual kind of end of class here. We didn't quite get through. Let's see how many slides do I have left here? Just a handful, and it's nothing too crazy. So we'll probably start kind of covering this at the beginning of next class. Let's see here. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Well, you don't really need to see me. I'll leave this up here for anyone who's taking notes. So, before next class, there's nothing due. That first participation quiz with those two questions, the one that we just kind of talked about, and then the syllabus question, that's not due until we start class on, or sorry, that's not due. My bad. That's due by the end of the day on Sunday. So all these participation quizzes, once again, I'm not expecting you're able to attend every single live lecture. Those will always be due at the end of the week. So anything that we cover through the week, that due date will be quite a bit out. Now, I would get into good practice of just doing them right after class, just so you don't forget. Other than the participation quiz related to today's lecture, the first thing that you need to do is get registered for Top Hat and get that first module 2 reading done before class on Wednesday. All right, so I'm giving you a little bit of a grace period here. Things are going to kind of start moving pretty quick here with class every day. But that first module reading isn't due until we start class on Wednesday. But we will quickly get through module 1 material and start module 2 tomorrow. And once again, I should have these. I'm gonna have to call the tech people and kind of have them come down and look at this classroom and get it, make sure it's working for tomorrow. Okay. Any questions for me before we kind of end today's class? Oh, okay. All right. If there's no questions, I will end this. We'll get this recording posted up on YouTube, and I will see you guys tomorrow.